I played the victim for years, blamed my family, my past, everyone but myself. And they believed me. They supported me until they finally saw the truth. I was the problem. They stopped calling, stopped trying. And now, every night, I sit alone in the silence I created, wondering if it's too late to take it all back. I played the victim so well I believed it. I could tell a story for every scar, every fracture, every burned bridge, and none of them ended with me. I was the one wronged, the one forgotten, the one who tried. I knew how to frame it, how to pause for effect, how to let silence linger just long enough for people to fill it with sympathy. I painted myself as misunderstood, wounded, endlessly forgiving. My parents didn't understand me. My siblings were cold. My friends used me. Exes took everything and left me broken. I never ran out of villains, just versions. I called it honesty, but it was curation. Every memory trimmed, edited, angled to make me look smaller, softer, easier to love. I kept the parts that hurt and left out the ones that showed what I did to cause it. I made pain a personality, and people responded. They leaned in. They consoled. They told me I was brave, that I deserved better, that I was strong for walking away from so much harm. What they didn't know was I created most of it. It's easy to rewrite the past when no one challenges you. Easier when you're the loudest one talking. Easiest when everyone trusts your hurt more than your history. I told the same story so many times, I forgot there were other versions. Versions where I was cruel, petty, manipulative. Versions where I started the fight and ended it by playing innocent. I didn't just lie to them, I lied to myself first. They always believed me. Family, friends, strangers I barely knew. They heard my voice tremble and assumed the truth was in the volume, not the content. And I let them. They didn't ask too many questions. They didn't need facts. I gave them tone, timing, just enough detail to make it real. And they showed up. They texted, "I'm so sorry you're going through this." They said things like, "You don't deserve that, and that must have been so hard." They dropped everything to meet me for coffee, called me strong, called me a survivor. I loved the way they looked at me with softness, like I was a bruised thing they could help fix. I told them my parents were distant, cold, maybe even emotionally abusive, that my siblings turned their backs on me, that I'd tried so hard to be the glue and ended up the scapegoat. They didn't know what really happened, how I'd stopped replying first, how I twisted words to win arguments, how I punished people for not reading my mind. They just saw the result, me hurt, crying, trying my best. And they believed every word, because I never gave them a reason not to. I kept my lies tidy, not dramatic, not obvious, just slanted. Just bent enough to shift the blame. It wasn't hard. All it took was a steady voice and a few deep sighs, and people lined up to tell me I was right. I blamed my parents first. Said they didn't love me right. Said they never saw me. That they only cared about appearances, control, who I was when other people were looking. I made it sound subtle, nuanced, like I was opening up about emotional neglect, not rewriting a childhood I didn't want to own. I told people my mother didn't support me, left out how I used her silence as proof of guilt, no matter what she did. Said my father was cold. Left out how I ignored him for months unless I needed something. I painted their concern as criticism, their boundaries as rejection. I told people they never listened. But I only ever gave them two options: agree with me or be the enemy. I remembered every birthday they forgot, every fight they started. Forgot the ones I did, forgot the holidays they hosted, the money they sent, the late-night phone calls where they stayed on the line while I said nothing. I told myself they failed me, because if they failed me, then I didn't have to look at the ways I pushed them out. It was easier to make them the problem, easier to be the wounded daughter than the one who never tried. So I told stories. Not lies exactly, just tilted truths. Ones that cast me in soft light and left them in shadow. And people nodded, said that must have been hard. They didn't ask for the rest, so I never gave it. Then I blamed my siblings. Said they were selfish, dismissive, unreachable, that they never showed up, never checked in, never cared about anything unless it directly affected them. I left out how I shut them out first, how I ignored texts because I didn't like the tone, how I skipped birthdays, then acted hurt when no one noticed. How I made every group chat about me until they stopped responding altogether. I called it abandonment, but it was withdrawal on my end. They didn't chase me. That was the real wound. Not what they did, but what they stopped doing. When they didn't take the bait, I labeled them cruel. Cold said they turned into strangers, but they were the same. I was the one who rewrote the rules, then punished them for following the old ones. I started fights, walked away, waited for them to come after me. They didn't, and I made that the crime, told people my sister was fake, that my brother was a narcissist, that I tried and they didn't meet me halfway. I left out that halfway to me meant total submission, that any challenge, any mirror, any memory I didn't like was labeled toxic. I pushed them out, then mourned the distance like it wasn't mine. My friends took my side. Why wouldn't they? I handed them a script and cried on cue. They called me strong for cutting people off, called it healing, called it boundaries. They told me I was brave for walking away, even though I was the one who slammed the door. I fed them stories where I was always trying, always the one hurt, always the one left behind. I told them my family didn't get me, that I'd outgrown them, that they were manipulative and bitter and clung to old versions of me because it was easier than facing their own flaws. They believed me, because I left out the parts where I was cruel, where I said things just to wound, where I used silence as a weapon and then cried when no one broke it. I turned every person I'd wronged into a villain and called it survival. And they clapped for me, said things like, "You're finally putting yourself first. You don't owe anyone an explanation." They were never really your people. They didn't ask what I had done. They just knew I was sad, and that was enough. I watched them repost the quotes I shared, listened as they told me I was inspiring, that my strength gave them courage. No one saw that I wasn't healing, I was hiding. Behind stories, behind filters, behind the kind of pain that only grows when you feed it attention and starve it truth. I didn't want support. I wanted loyalty. And I got it. Until I didn't. I burned bridges and called it healing, blocked numbers like rituals, unfollowed people I used to love and called it peace, posted vague quotes about protecting my energy while knowing exactly who they were meant to sting. I convinced myself I was setting boundaries, but really I was avoiding being seen. Silence became my weapon. I used it to punish, not to protect. Disappeared from conversations before anyone could hold me accountable. Stopped replying, then acted wounded when no one followed up. I didn't give people space. I gave them ultimatums, and when they didn't fight to keep me, I framed it as confirmation. Proof that they were never safe, never real, never worth the effort I claimed to have given. I made a personality out of disappearing. Told people I was healing, growing, choosing myself. But healing never requires a witness. What I was doing was curating distance, so no one could see the version of me I didn't want to explain. The bitter one, the angry one, the one still clinging to the same story, rewriting it in prettier fonts, hoping it would read like strength. It didn't, it just looked like isolation wrapped in pride. But I told myself that was progress, because no one was around to disagree. But I never changed. I just circled the same mess, blaming different people. New names, same ending. Same arguments, same silence. Same gut-deep feeling that something was wrong, just never me. Every fallout followed the same pattern. I'd feel unseen, start pulling away, wait for them to notice. When they didn't, I'd accuse them of abandoning me. When they did, I'd say it wasn't enough. I couldn't be satisfied because I wasn't honest. I didn't know how to let people close without scripting how they should act. I didn't want connection, I wanted control. And when I couldn't get it, I played hurt. Every relationship became a stage, every conflict a performance. I knew how to cry without feeling. I knew how to say I'm fine and make it sound like a trap. Even with new people, I brought the same story. I've been through a lot. My family isn't safe. I've had to protect myself. No one asked what I'd done in return. I said I had boundaries, but all I really had were exits, preloaded, rehearsed, always ready. I thought I was becoming harder to hurt. I was just becoming easier to leave. They started noticing. Not all at once, just little things at first. Pauses in conversation, shorter replies, less energy in their voices when I told the same stories again. Eyes that used to soften started holding still. They weren't cold, just quieter. Like they were listening differently now. One friend stopped reacting when I vented, just nodded and said, "That's tough," instead of "they don't deserve you." Another didn't text back for days after I sent a long message about how everyone leaves. When she finally did, it was polite. Distant, not unkind, just done. I knew the signs, the emotional distance. The careful tone, the slow fade, I'd seen it before. But this time, it wasn't coming from the people I'd written off, it was coming from the ones who used to believe me without question. They didn't say what they were thinking. They didn't need to. Their silence was different now. It wasn't out of confusion or hurt. It was clarity, they saw it. The patterns. The way my stories never changed, but the villains always did. And without saying a word, they started stepping back. Not because they were cruel, but because they finally knew I wasn't telling the whole truth. Someone finally called me out. It wasn't dramatic. No yelling, no accusations. Just a quiet, steady truth I couldn't dodge. We were sitting in her car, my oldest friend. She'd been listening to me spiral through another story, how my brother didn't check in, how my parents were probably talking about me behind my back. I said it all like fact. Like I needed her to nod along. She didn't. She looked straight ahead, then said, "Do you ever think maybe you just pushed them too far?" I froze. She wasn't being cruel. Her voice was soft, not judgment, just exhaustion. I started to speak, to launch into a defense, but she kept going. Every time something falls apart, it's never you. It's always they did this or they didn't do that. But it's the same story over and over. Same ending. Same blame. I laughed, awkward, like she was joking. She didn't laugh back. Then she said it. "I think you hurt people, and I think you hide behind pain so you don't have to admit it." No malice, no attack, just a mirror. I wanted to scream at her. Cry, say she didn't understand. But for the first time, I didn't feel misunderstood. I felt seen. Too seen. I got out of the car early, said I was tired. Told her we'd talk later. We didn't. I denied everything. Said she was gaslighting me. That she'd turned on me like the rest of them. That I should have known better than to trust anyone. I replayed the conversation in my head, twisted every line until it sounded like an attack. I told myself she was cold, that she never really cared, that her silence afterward proved she just wanted to hurt me. I vented about her to anyone who'd listen, called it a betrayal, called her manipulative, said she made me feel unsafe. I used every word I'd learned to deflect responsibility. Trauma, boundaries, emotional labor. Words that once meant something but now felt hollow in my mouth. Because deep down, I knew she was right. But I wasn't ready to admit it. I told myself she just didn't understand what I'd been through. That she was projecting. That she was jealous of the people who hadn't walked away from me. I doubled down. Refused to reach out. Waited for her to apologize. Waited for her to feel guilty for telling the truth. She didn't. And the longer the silence stretched, the louder her words echoed in my head. "I think you hurt people." It didn't matter how I tried to spin it. The truth was out, and I was the only one still pretending it wasn't. One by one, they left. Not in a rush, not in anger, just slowly, quietly, like people backing out of a room where they were no longer welcome. The texts stopped first. The check-ins faded. Group chats moved on without me. Invites stopped coming, not because they forgot, but because they'd stopped expecting me to show up. No big final words, no confrontations, just silence where warmth used to be. I noticed it late. Thought maybe they were just busy. Told myself I liked the space. But nights got longer. The room got quieter. No one called to ask how I was. No one circled back after I went dark for days. No one reminded me I was missed. They stopped defending me. Stopped correcting the stories I told. Stopped trying to hold on. And I realized, somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being someone worth the effort. I'd spun so many narratives, they didn't know what to believe anymore. So they chose peace. Without me, and for the first time, I couldn't pretend I was the one being left behind. I'd pushed them out. And they finally let the door close. I told myself I didn't need them, said I was better off alone. That solitude was strength. That losing people was just part of growth. I repeated it like a mantra. Turned it into a shield. But every night the room got quieter, not peaceful, just empty. There was no one to text when something funny happened. No one to call when anxiety crept in. No one to check if I made it home safe. I scrolled my contacts and closed the app without typing a word. I told so many people to leave me alone that eventually they did. And it wasn't brave. It wasn't empowering. It was cold, still, hollow. I sat with it. The silence. The space I once fought for. And I wondered if this was what I really wanted or just what I was left with. I told myself I was strong. But I wasn't strong. I was alone. And I'd done it to myself. I checked their pages from burner accounts. The ones I swore I didn't care about. The ones I used to pretend they didn't matter anymore. Weddings, babies, new jobs, vacations, group photos with the caption chosen family, smiles I hadn't seen in years, inside jokes I wasn't part of anymore. They looked happy, not forced, not staged, just light. I zoomed in on faces, read every comment, watched stories on mute, tried to guess how long they'd been okay without me. No one mentioned me, no vague posts, no indirect grief. They'd moved on, not in a flashy way, not out of spite, just naturally. Like healing that happened when I stopped showing up to reopen the wound. I used to think they'd miss me forever, but forever ended quietly. And now I was just a watcher, lurking in the spaces I used to belong, pretending I didn't care while memorizing every detail. They weren't hiding, they just stopped waiting for me to come back. I remembered what I said about them. The lies, the half-truths, the words I sharpened to hurt, then repeated so often I started believing them. I remembered telling people my sister was manipulative, that she only cared about appearances. I left out the time she showed up at my door at midnight because I texted, "I can't do this anymore." I said my brother was selfish, cold. Left out how many times he offered to help, how many chances I ignored. I said my mom never supported me. Left out the calls, the cards, the quiet ways she tried to reach me before I blocked her. I twisted their flaws into proof of betrayal. Turned small misunderstandings into long-running injuries. Exaggerated every slight until I sounded like the victim I wanted to be. And the worst part? They weren't perfect. They had their own faults. But I never gave them the grace I demanded. Never let them explain. Never let them be human. I used their complexity against them and weaponized it into justification. Now I was sitting in the silence I swore was healing, choking on the words I couldn't take back. I remembered everything I said about them. And finally, I understood what it cost. I tried to rewrite it all in my head. Tried to turn the story back in my favor. Tried to make the pain theirs again. Told myself they gave up on me too easily, that they could have tried harder. That real love doesn't walk away. I replayed moments, twisted them again, softer this time, more subtle. I wanted to believe I was still the one who got hurt first, that I was just reacting, that my silence was a defense, not a punishment. But it didn't work this time. I couldn't lie to myself with the same ease, couldn't ignore the details, couldn't unsee the ways I chipped away at every connection until all that was left was resentment dressed as self-protection. I wanted to feel wronged. Instead, I felt exposed. There was no one left to convince, no audience, no applause, just me. And the truth that kept getting harder to run from, they didn't turn on me. They outgrew the version of me I refused to fix. I wanted to rewrite the ending, but the story didn't need editing. It needed honesty. And I'd run out of places to hide. I thought about reaching out, wrote the messages in my head, practiced the first lines. Tried to imagine their faces if my name popped up again. Would they read it? Would they delete it without opening? Would they show someone else and laugh at how long it took me to finally say something real? I hovered over the idea for days. Played with the wording, searched for the version of sorry that didn't sound desperate, that didn't beg. That said, I know I hurt you without expecting anything back. But every time I got close, I stopped. Not because I was scared of rejection, though I was, but because I knew they weren't being cruel. They were protecting their peace, and I was the thing they'd had to heal from. That's what made the silence hard to break. Not the risk of being ignored, but the certainty that they were finally okay. And I didn't know how to face the fact that forgiveness might not be part of their healing. That closure might have already happened, without me. I practiced apologies I'll never send, typed them into my notes app, recorded voice memos just to hear the words out loud. I'm sorry for what I said. I'm sorry for what I made you carry. I'm sorry for making myself the center of every story and calling it survival. Some of them felt too small. Some felt too late. Most felt like they were meant for ghosts, versions of people who'd stopped waiting for the apology years ago. I wrote to my sister, told her I lied about her, that I took the easy way out and called it bravery, that I miss her laugh more than I'll ever admit out loud. I wrote to my mom, said I didn't know how much she tried until I stopped trying, that I used her silence to justify my own. I wrote to my friends, said, "You were right, I was the chaos. I was the reason it all felt heavy." I never hit send. I deleted every draft, listened to the recordings once, then swiped them away. Not because I didn't mean them, but because I knew apologies don't fix what time and patterns broke. They might bring peace, but they don't rebuild trust. They don't rewrite history, and I wasn't sure anyone needed to hear them anymore. Except me. I sit with the quiet now, no more justifying, no more defense. No one to call, no one to spin it for, just me, the truth. And the silence I once weaponized, now settling into something heavier than I ever expected. The nights are long, not tragic, not loud with regret, just still. I scroll through old photos sometimes. Not to miss them, just to remember what it felt like when they looked at me like I mattered. When I hadn't pushed them away yet, when they were still trying. Now, no one's trying, no text waiting, no calls missed. No name lighting up the screen that means you still have a chance. I sit in that, not to punish myself, but because it's finally the only honest place left to be. I let the truth stretch out across the room. I don't fill it with noise. I don't cover it with new narratives. I don't dress it up in progress. I just sit here, with everything I broke. And no one left to blame but me. I don't know if it's too late. I tell myself there's still time. That maybe someone somewhere would take the call. That if I found the right words, the right tone, the right version of I was wrong, maybe something could be salvaged. But deep down, I know what I did. And I know how long I waited to care. Too long, long enough for people to move on, to build lives without me, to heal in directions I'm not part of anymore. Long enough for my name to become a line they don't cross, not out of hate, but out of habit. I used to think accountability came with redemption. It doesn't. It comes with consequences. Sometimes it rebuilds things. Sometimes it just confirms what's already lost. I can't measure time in days anymore. I measure it in the spaces where connection used to be, in all the moments I didn't reach out, all the ones where I doubled down instead of backing down. Maybe it's not too late, but I know I waited too long to try. And that has a weight all its own. This silence is mine, and I built every inch of it, not with honesty, not with healing, but with stories I made up to avoid the truth. With people I pushed away and then blamed for not holding on tighter. With decisions I dressed up as strength when they were just fear in disguise. Now I sit in a room that used to be full of noise, conversations, arguments, comfort, and it's quiet. No buzz from a new message. No warmth behind a door. Just the glow of my phone screen lighting up my own reflection. I hold the device like it still might save me. Draft a message, delete it, scroll, refresh. Nothing. I think about all the things I'd say if I could go back. But this moment, this stillness, this is the cost of waiting, of avoiding, of choosing pride over people. And now I have no one left to send the message to, not because they're gone, but because I made sure they had to leave. So I sit here, quiet, aware, alone, finally facing the silence I spent years creating, and knowing it won't answer back. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.